let's talk about different type of IR sensor. The first type of IR sensor we're going to talk about is bright beam sensor. The structure of this kind of sensor is simple. We got transmitter on one side, we got receiver on the other side. So if nothing between the transmitter and the receiver, then the receiver side is going to send out a signal which is on, which means the receiver has received the IR from the other side. However, if we got something in between, for instance, a piece of paper, then the receiver is no longer receiving the signal from the other side. So it's going to generate an off signal. So by knowing whether the signal is on or off, we know whether there is an object between the transmitter and the receiver. This kind of uh, property can be used for printer. So we can use this kind of sensor located in the uh, paper inlet or paper outlet. As long as it has been, there is a paper presented in this slot, we know the paper is ready. If we always receive an on signal, it means that the paper is not ready. With this kind of sensor, it's easy for us to do the automation for printers. That is one type. The other type is reflective sensor. So instead of putting transmitter and receiver on two sides, we can place transmitter and receiver on the same side, like this. So the benefit of doing this one is when we send out the IR signal, and if there is something in front of the transmitter, the signal is going to be bounced back to the receiver. So as soon as receiver receive a signal, then it's going to be turned on. So by detecting whether it's going to be on or off, we can determine whether there is something in front of the sensor, or in other words, in front of the robot. So because the IR has its own limitation of distance, this one can be used for proximity sensor to detect whether there is something in front of it. And this is also a very common application for IR sensor. Again, for this kind of properties, for this kind of sensors, they always got the advantage of easy to implement, and they normally works very well in a controlled environment. However, this kind of sensor also sensitive to ambient light, which means you might have some noises if you are not have a well-controlled environment. If you need to have the sensor to be performed in an environment which is not so well controlled, then we probably need to do some other things. That is going to be modulated signal. We're going to talk about that later. So this slide over here is talking about how an IR reflective sensor is going to work, how uh, uh, the signal is going to be transmitted, and how it's going to be received, and what kind of application it can be used for object detection in front of the, the robot. It can also be used for line following, because if the surface in front of the IR sensor is not really reflective, for instance, if it's black, then the receiver might not be able to receive something. But if we know the robot is close to some kind of a structure in front of it, if we do not receive the reflective signal, it means that the color on the wall is going to be black. So with that idea, we should be able to do some kind of a light following or wall tracking based on the black light uh, in presence on the wall or on the ground. So those kind of things are something that we can use. It also subject to the drawbacks other IR sensor is going to have. It always need easy to be perturbated if the ambient lighting control is not so well in the environment. So those kind of things always need to be careful of using this kind of sensor. Keep in mind, IR sensor has a limitation in terms of distance. If you try to detect something like 20, 30 meters away, then it's not possible. We can only detect uh, an object within certain amount of distance in front of the IR sensor. So if we try to do something uh, in an environment which is not so well controlled, you might have different kind of light sources in the environment. Then we will need to modulate the signal from simply on off signal into a modulated signal. So this is one of example. You can send out a sequence, digital sequence, to be different kind of on off, and it can be 1001, those kind of things. So if we can follow specific protocol and emit the signal from the emitter and have the receiver on the other side, which is this receiver over here, then it's going to receive a specific sequence of a signal. So by decoding the signal, then the microprocessor is going to determine which kind of signal has been received, and then it is going to respond to the specific sequence according to the protocol between the emitter and the receiver. One of the most well-known application of this kind of sensor is TV remote. So if you try to change the channel, or you wanna increase the volume, or you wanna do something, maybe do some kind of setting, and you can always use your remote, TV remote to perform different kind of functions. But we also notice that it doesn't matter which kind of environment we have. It can be in the dark room. It can be a very bright room. It can be a room with a lot of sunshine. So it means that this kind of method or implementation is less affected by external noises. However, when you are using this kind of this specific method, you would need to follow specific protocol between to communicate between emitter and the transmitter. The last one, IR distance sensor. This kind of sensor is very popular in um, robot applications because this one, uh, again, this is just similar to reflective sensor. One side is light emitter, and the other side is light receiver. So with those kind of those two things equipped as a pair on the sensor, we should be able to detect the distance between the object and the sensor by detecting the reflected signal that the emitter sends out. The distance, however, is limited because it normally is not greater than maybe 1 meter or 2 meters, depending on which kind of sensor you're using. But normally, we are trying to detect object within 1 meter. And also, this kind of sensor is going to uh, be disturbed by the ambient environment because, again, if the signal is modulated and in our normal environment, IR is everywhere. So if you do not control the environment carefully, the IR sensor might detect something that are not desired. You do not desire. So keep in mind those kind of things needs to be carefully selected. And if you need to use protocol to do some kind of verification so that the measurement is going to be precise, then you probably need to consider using modulated signal type of communication.